The current crisis is the coup targeting the President of the United States, Donald Trump. I know they say it's impeachment. It's an impeachment inquiry. It's not an impeachment inquiry in the constitutional sense of the word. It's an abuse of power by the leaders of the House Democrats who have taken this awesome power they've been granted by the Constitution in virtue of running the House to go after a president they don't like on policy grounds, not because he did any corrupt acts, but because they see it as an opportunity to gain political leverage and provide, in my view, protection to themselves from the consequences of their allies' illegal misconduct in the Spygate targeting of President Trump. I want you to think about that. There is confirmation in recent weeks that the Justice Department has concluded that there were crimes. There's evidence of crimes associated with the Spygate targeting of President Trump. I'll say it again. The Justice Department has concluded there is evidence of crimes in the Spygate targeting of President Trump. So when you think about that, who was involved in the Spygate targeting of President Trump? It wasn't 1,000 people in the FBI. It wasn't 1,000 people in the CIA. It wasn't 1,000 people in the State Department. No, it was the upper echelons, the top leadership, the top state of the deep state was implicated in the targeting of President Trump. Who would that be? Comey, McCabe, Brennan, Clapper, Strzok, Page, over in the State Department, Kerry, Nuland, over in the White House, Susan Rice, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, the Vice President at the time. They all knew about the Spygate targeting. So these are the senior leadership of the Obama administration has been implicated. It is strongly suggested by public reports in a crime. And who's the crime victim? Donald Trump. So what's the reaction of the deep state? What's the reaction of the establishment media? Let's drive Donald Trump from office for asking questions about the very crimes he's a victim of. For doing his job as president and conducting foreign policy, for doing his job as the top law enforcement officer of the federal government and making sure the rule of law is vindicated. That's what he's trying to be. That's why they're trying to drive him from office. There's no merit behind any impeachment of the president. The latest news is there will be no coup. You can't have a coup without a show trial. So the show trial part of the coup will begin soon, next week, with public hearings that are severely restricted in the sense that Republicans will get a chance to make recommendations for witnesses, and we don't know what those recommendations will be, but only if they're blessed by Adam Schiff, the conflicted head of the Intelligence Committee. The president will have no ability to participate in the questioning of witnesses. And so the abuse of power will continue in these show trials next week. But what also is interesting is now, and the good news is the Democrats haven't been able to power their way through all objections to their abusive activities. They've had to kind of step back a little bit and feign interest in transparency, feign interest in affording more process or due process to the sham investigation they're conducting. And that's resulted in the show trial hearings. That's resulted in the vote that they went through. That's resulted in the release of transcripts that you can bet they never wanted to release. Now, of course, the transcripts are being released in a way to make it, the Democrats are releasing the transcripts and characterizing them the way you would expect. But I think it's important you review the transcripts. I've reviewed as much of the transcripts as I could. There are 2 new transcripts that have been just released as we go to video today, but so I haven't looked at those. But I think they're very interesting because they show you just how, it's hard to describe it, how both corrupt and dangerous this coup is, but also how fundamentally petty and boring the coup is as well. Because when you look at the testimony, you see bureaucrats and appointees worrying about their jobs, being a little bit confused as to who was setting policy or what the policy goal was, bickering with each other. It's the Gossip Girl impeachment. It's bureaucratic back and forth, complaining mostly about the president doing his job as president, which is to direct policy. And you see these deep staters, some of whom were anti-Trumpers, even though nominally they were appointed by Trump, complaining about the president's prerogatives in that regard. And I tell you, that's the sort of exposure that even this transparency, however bastardized it is useful to have for. Because without seeing these transcripts, we wouldn't see the full breadth of the deep state contempt for our Republican form of government. What do I mean by Republican form of government? It means that you vote in elections, and you vote for members of Congress, you vote for the Senate, and you vote for the President of the United States. And sometimes you vote against the President of the United States. But the deep state attitude is, it doesn't matter who you vote for. It doesn't matter that there's an election that took place that you've worked your tail off on, either for or against the particular candidate, because the deep state's going to run things no matter what. And especially if the president wants to do something that he thinks he's been granted the, how dare he? He thinks he was elected president. And he's exercising his prerogatives as president. And the deep state comes in and says no. And this is what you see in these hearings and these transcripts. You see the deep state saying no to the president's concerns about corruption in Ukraine. You see no to the president saying, well, why are we giving money to Ukraine, or why are we sending military aid to Ukraine when there are these outstanding corruption issues? Perfectly legitimate. You know, the president said to read the transcript, and I encourage you to read the transcript. The media gets outraged, the left pretends to be outraged about what he said about Joe Biden, for instance, that there were concerns about the firing of the prosecutor and what Biden and his son were up to there. Perfectly legitimate concerns for the president to be talking about. And the left would have you believe because Joe Biden's running for president, he's immune from scrutiny in law enforcement. That's the attitude they took with Hillary Clinton. And then, of course, once Hillary Clinton lost the presidency, the deep state's approach and the establishment approach is, well, you know, she's no longer running for office. She's no longer a public figure, so therefore we shouldn't prosecute her. Isn't that convenient? Let me tell you about Ukraine. Ukraine was the focal point. Everything was hanging on Ukraine when it came to taking out President Trump. And now we're not allowed to be worried about how that took place. Because the Russia conspiracy theorists, and there were, hold on, I don't want to call them conspiracy theorists, the defamers, those who were knowingly lying about Russia collusion, calling the president an agent of Russia, it hinged legally on making the case that all was happening through Ukraine. Why do we know that? Because that's why Paul Manafort was targeted. It was his relationship with Ukrainian political parties associated with pro-Russia interests that became the focus of the Mueller special counsel abuse. And they thought if they could get him on that, they could tie it all up to Russia. And of course, that was all a fraud. And it's been proven to be a fraud because Mueller's been forced to admit, every investigation that's looked at this has been forced to admit, there never was any collusion, any knowing collusion with the Russians who were supposedly trying to influence our elections. You're right, you heard me say supposedly, because frankly, I don't trust anything the intelligence community has come up with about Russia involvement in our nation's political life. I would presume the Russians would be doing that as a matter of course, but the specifics and the motives, I don't believe a word the corrupted intelligence community has to say about it. Can't be trusted. Can't be trusted. And now we know there's criminal activity behind the counterintelligence investigation and targeting of President Trump. Further confirmation that what went on in terms of the Russiagate scandal. Everything we know about it, you can't trust in terms of what the received wisdom is out of the deep state. So this is why we have the coup. The coup is designed to freeze the Justice Department from exploring the issues I'm talking about, and it's also designed to distract from what is likely going to happen, which is a release of an IG report on FISA abuse, which will further confirm what we already know, thanks in large measure to Judicial Watch, that there was fraud upon the FISA court and basically abuse without precedent in terms of targeting President Trump. And there are crimes associated with that fraud, whether it be specifically on FISA or not, I do not know. But as I said, there is evidence that crimes took place. That's what they're worried about. And so we see this, this corruption. It occurred during the Obama administration. It continued through the Trump administration with the focus on Ukraine and Russia. The harassing Mueller investigation, which was just one long effort to remove the president, so that was part of the coup. The baton was handed over to the Democrats. They weren't getting as much traction as they liked with Mueller. But believe you me, they will come back around again to the abusive Mueller investigation and suggest that the president's prerogatives to object to his abusive investigation is impeachable. And of course, now they're using this Ukraine phone call as the hook.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.